Probably the biggest thing that stops people traveling to the countries that they're interested in is the concern for their safety. Is the country safe enough? What is the likelihood of something bad happening to me? Most of the time, because of the media, a person will simply rule out an entire country just because the media has made them believe that it is extremely unsafe and that they will probably die if they go. And on top of that, you have your parents who might know nothing about the country and just believe the media, which can be very confusing if you're a young budding backpacker who just wants to travel the world and have a good time. And this is the case for quite literally any non-Western country. The advice and information I'm going to be discussing in this video can and should be applied to any country that you go backpacking to, but in this video we are specifically going to be discussing your safety in Colombia. Colombia is the most recent country I visited. I backpacked around pretty much the whole country for just over 3 months. I went to Spanish school, learned how to salsa, explored from the Pacific coast to the Caribbean islands, right the way up to the seemingly abandoned desert that is La Guajira. Now, I was warned a lot about the risks to my safety before visiting Colombia. It doesn't have the best reputation. I knew this before visiting, and I made sure that I followed my own personal basic backpacker safety rules. So what are the basic backpacker safety rules, I hear you ask? Bring at least 2 padlocks with you, one for your backpack and one for the hostel lockers. I like these flexible ones because hostel lockers come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Sometimes the holes are a bit skew-with, so you need something that's going to fit the bill on every occasion. And then of course you must actually use the lockers. Don't leave your valuables unattended. Number 2, don't go to secluded spots at night by yourself. If you do need to get somewhere, call a taxi or get someone to escort you. Number 3, always have a charged phone on you and preferably with a local SIM inside. It may be worth carrying around a portable charger, and the reason for the local SIM is so that you can stay connected and have valuable information at your fingertips when you really need it. You'll need to make sure that your phone is unlocked before you travel. Number 4, before you go, get travel insurance. Because if something were to go wrong, you are not held back by the financial stress of having to fix that situation. Number 5, dress appropriately to respect the customs of the country that you are in. Number 6, don't take drugs or drinks from people you don't know or trust. And number 7, never get to the point where you are a liability. It's not cute and it's not safe. A lot of those may seem obvious to you, and if they are currently not obvious to you, make them obvious to you, because this is your basic backpacker safety for wherever you are in the world. But now back to Colombia. In my time there, nothing bad happened to me personally, and I did not feel unsafe. However, it would be irresponsible if I didn't share with you some stories of when things haven't gone so well for some travelers. There is a saying in Colombia called "No dar papaya," which means don't give papaya. Now, I know what you're thinking, that still doesn't make sense. It basically means don't give the bad person a reason to target you. And my basic backpacker safety rules will cover you for most of this. But in Colombia, this also extends to not having your valuables out in public. Even your phone, keep it away somewhere where it's not visible and not accessible. Pickpocketing and petty theft are very common. You will hear numerous stories from backpackers who have had something stolen. Their phone just being taken out of their hand by someone in a passing vehicle, wallets being stolen from pockets, maybe they've done something to distract you which has made you a bit flustered and then reached in and grabbed some of your valuables in the meantime. If it makes you feel any better, you won't just hear these stories from tourists. This happens to locals as well. There is no exception to the rule unless you have followed the rule of no dar papaya. Having a bum bag or crossbody bag that sits on your front is perfect because your valuables are zipped away, not to be seen. Don't get them out. Okay, so what about the stories about the people who have been robbed at gunpoint, knife point, or something similar? This is a lot more serious, and it's not impossible that this could happen to you even if you don't have your valuables on show. First of all, I'd like to say that this is very unlikely. You do hear stories about it, but the chances are very slim, and in pretty much every case there were clear but avoidable factors that contributed to the attacks. I want to share with you Nomadic Matt's story and the important factors to take away from his experience. Nomadic Matt is a very popular travel blogger, and last year he shared how he was stabbed in Bogota, or knifed to be more specific because the knife was small and didn't go in deep. Anyway, Matt's story. He had been in Colombia for a while and was aware of the possible bad things that could happen. He's a very experienced traveler, but he, like many tourists, became complacent because nothing bad had yet happened to him. It's all very well and good you hearing this advice and information from me and from others and sticking to it, but when you are in Colombia, you will see all the locals just have their phones out on the street and it seems fine. So you start becoming more casual with your own valuables, and when nothing bad happens, you feel safe and it feels normal. So Matt was in the reception of his hostel in Bogota with his phone in his hand. He then walks just outside of the hostel onto the street, still with his phone in his hand, and 3 steps out of the hostel, a guy tries to snatch his phone. Matt obviously reacted in defense and held on tight to his phone and pulled it in. The guy continued to fight with Matt, and Matt continued to fight back, now yelling for help and keeping his guard up. To cut a long story short, because of the adrenaline, Matt didn't realize that this guy was actually knifing him. After a short amount of time, people came running over to help. The guy had run away. Matt actually still had his phone, but he was obviously in shock. The people helping him were so friendly, made sure he got to the hospital okay. The owner of Matt's hostel actually came to the hospital and stayed with Matt to make sure that he recovered okay. They ended up catching the bad guy, who got sent to prison, and Matt recovered from his wounds. Now, this is a very abbreviated version of the story, and I will link Matt's post in the description so you can read it for yourself. So what can we learn from this story? Matt himself admitted that he had become complacent. At the beginning of his trip, he never would have walked out on the street with his phone in his hand. But because he saw other people doing it and he started doing it and it was always fine, he became comfortable with it. Lesson 1, never become complacent. Another thing to perhaps take away from this is that things only got violent when Matt resisted. If Matt had just handed over his phone immediately, things would not have become violent. But of course, like Matt says in his post, that's not your instinct in the moment, just to hand over your phone to someone who wants to grab it. But a lesson that we can perhaps take from that is that if someone is trying to threaten you, it's probably best to hand over your things. Another story, I have a friend who was approached in Cali by 3 guys who had a gun. They could not see his valuables, but they asked for his phone. My friend said, "You can't have my phone because I need it for things, but I will give you some of my cash." The robbers said okay, they took the cash and went on their way. I definitely would not have been as brave as my friend in this situation, but he was alone. There wasn't anyone else on the street. Perhaps had he not been completely alone on this deserted street, that probably wouldn't have happened. I also met a guy who was with his friend on a night out. They met 2 Colombian girls and decided to book a love hotel. The guy I met said he got a bad vibe from the girls and he decided to go home, but his friend wanted to stay. The Colombian girls were making up and giving him drinks in the hotel, and the next thing he remembers is waking up in the morning with his phone and wallet stolen. So that's enough about bad stories. Although these are terrible things that happened, I hope you can see how these situations could have been avoided if these people stuck to the rules and didn't become complacent. So let's talk a little bit more about no Dar Papaya and things to actively do and not do to avoid bad situations. Cash and ATMs. Don't get cash out of an ATM which is just open on the street. Make sure it is one that is inside a bank or shopping mall, somewhere with security cameras. Don't get out too much cash at once unless you absolutely have to, and put it somewhere safe before you leave. If you do have to withdraw a large amount of cash, I recommend putting a small amount in your daily day-to-day purse and the rest of it in a hidden pocket somewhere else on you. Using your phone. Go inside to use your phone. Into a restaurant, into a shop, a hostel, a shopping mall, a bank, it doesn't matter. If you need to use your phone while walking out on the street, wait until you can go inside somewhere, then use your phone, and then you can head back out onto the street with your phone away. You may well see other people with their phones out who are seemingly fine. Most of the time it is fine, but you do so at your own risk. Using cameras. If you are either in the wilderness or in a really touristy area, generally it is fine and normal to get your camera out. Whenever I use my camera, it was always either strapped around my wrist like my GoPro or strapped around my body with my big camera. I never got my big camera out when I was on my own. I only ever did when I was either walking with someone else or like part of a group. Now, you may have seen me using my GoPro and my phone in vlogs when I was by myself. I'm afraid to say this was me becoming complacent. I felt safe, and the chances are that I was safe. But if I wanted to guarantee that something bad would not happen, I shouldn't have done that. That was at my own risk. I asked you all on Instagram a few days ago, when you think about safety in Colombia, what is it specifically that you are scared of? Getting raped, murdered, kidnapped by a drug cartel all came up amongst other things. I personally have never heard any of these happening to tourists in recent years. Colombia has changed a lot over the past 20 years. Most Colombians are utterly ashamed and embarrassed of the reputation that their past has given them, because Colombians are genuinely some of the nicest and friendliest people people on the planet. However, as in every country, there are some rotten eggs amongst them, but being sold to sex slavery is unheard of for backpackers nowadays, and it's even less likely to happen if you don't give papaya. A few other concerns included unwanted male attention, catcalling, and creepy men. I can safely say my experiences of this in Colombia were not even half as bad as they are in Ladbroke Grove in London. Public transport and night buses. Your biggest threat here is pickpocketing and petty theft. If I could, I would keep all of my bags on me or next to me the entire time, which is where having a small backpack does come in handy. If there is physically no space on the bus for your big bag, at the very least, have all of your valuables in a bag that's zipped up and sits on your lap. And again, if you can, don't get your valuables out at any point, but if you must, make sure that you are discreet. Are the taxis reliable? Generally, I would always favour getting an Uber or equivalent. In Colombia, you have Cabify, Didi, Beats, which you can try downloading all of those. And when your ride arrives, don't say, is that for Christianne? Because they could just say, you say, ¿Cómo te llamas? Which means, what is your name? They must tell you their name, which must match up with whoever you have on your screen before you get in the car. You can also, of course, cross-check their picture, check their reviews, check the vehicle that they're in. And then when you are in the car, you can do things like pretend to call someone who is at the destination that you're getting dropped off at. You can make it seem like this person is expecting your arrival. You can talk to them about where you currently are in the car and the things that you're driving past. If the driver was planning on doing anything dodgy, he's certainly not going to be so keen if he knows that someone is expecting you. Taxis are generally okay though. I would just make sure that you get either your hostel or a restaurant to call you one from a reputable service. Check that the taxi has a working meter, and if not, make sure that you negotiate the final price before you get in the car. And if it is on the meter, make sure that you are tracking your journey on Google Maps or something similar to make sure that your taxi driver is not just driving around in circles trying to ramp up the price. Make it known to your taxi driver that you know exactly where you're going. Is it better to dress modestly? I mean, it doesn't hurt to dress more modestly, but generally you can dress however you want within reason. A lot of Colombians are pretty liberal in the way that they dress. You can wear shorts, strappy tops, crop tops. Maybe don't dress like a hooker, because that might give people the wrong impression, but it's not like the Middle East, for example. Did you feel particularly vulnerable as a solo female? Honestly, no. I feel like I always say this, but as a solo traveler, I'm actually very, very rarely completely by myself. If I was and I had to walk somewhere that wasn't a street which other people are down, I'd definitely get a taxi. I'd recommend that you do the same, even if you're a man. Use your initiative, take no shit from people trying to give you a hard time. I'd say the same for wherever you were in the world, male or female, friends or not. How to pick a good hostel in Colombia and not a dodgy one. So I would always recommend reading the reviews on booking.com and Hostelworld to get a good sense of what the hostel is like. But some hostels in Colombia that you can trust throughout the country are Selena hostels and Viajero hostels. Are there any common scams to be aware of? Someone told me on Instagram that they were told never to give their passport to a policeman doing random street texts because they might hold it ransom for bribe. So you can avoid this by not carrying your passport on you generally. But if for some reason the policeman knows that you have it, you can say something along the lines of, I'm only going to give this to you when we are in a police station, not on the street. Because if they are not a real policeman, they are obviously not going to want to do that. An obvious scam that you get everywhere in the world is just market vendors and their prices. Obviously, they will say the price is much, much higher than it actually is, so just remember to negotiate down. People telling you that they have no change. A lot of the time they do actually have change, but they're just super reluctant to give it to you. A way that you can avoid this is making sure you have small change on you at all times. The supermarket is normally a good place where you can break your big notes. Okay, so in summary, yes, I do believe that Colombia is a safe country to visit, but keep your wits about you, no Dar Papaya, and don't become complacent. And you will have an incredible time and enjoy the very best that Colombia has to offer, because it is an amazing country to go backpacking. Even if you did become complacent, which I'll be honest, I certainly did, you still have to be pretty unlucky for something bad to actually happen. It's really just a case of wrong place, wrong time, but if you follow the rules, those risks are eliminated. And like I said, Colombians are some of the nicest people on the planet. They are so hospitable and will really go out of their way to help you. They are so kind, and they are so upset when people don't want to visit the country because of its past and reputation. You can purchase my Backpacking Colombia Google Map Legend with all my hostel, restaurant and activity recommendations on backpackingbananas.com. I will leave a link for that in in the description. And if you have any other safety tips for Colombia, please do leave them in the comments. You can also ask questions on the Backpackers forum on backpackingbananas.com, and I will link that in the description as well. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or found it useful, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!